He walks into the wedding alone. No date, no ring, no apologies. He is not bitter, he is not broken. In fact, he's the calmest person in the room. While the groom fidgets and the bride clutches her bouquet like a lifeline, this man moves like he's not part of the performance, like he sees something no one else can. Eyes follow him, whispers trail behind him. Aunties exchange glances, fathers avoid eye contact. Even the married men straighten up in their suits. Subtly, defensively, they smile at him. But it's the kind of smile people give when they are unsure if they are looking at a friend or a threat, because he's everything they were told not to be. Unattached, unashamed, unbothered. He does not brag, he does not defend his choice. When someone jokes, "Still single, huh?" he just nods and says, "I don't need marriage." Silence, not mockery, not laughter, just stillness. Like he dropped a forbidden truth into the middle of a ritual, because deep down, they all felt it. The quiet terror of a man who walks through life whole. A man who does not chase completion through anyone else. A man who is not lonely in solitude, but powerful in it. He does not fit their script. He does not play the part. He does not need the mask of matrimony to prove his manhood. And that's exactly what makes him dangerous. Not to women, not to marriage, but to a system built on male dependence, emotional obedience, and quiet compliance. He is proof that the world they were sold might be a lie. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. If one man can thrive without marriage, what does that say about the rest of us who could not? That's the real fear, and it's time to face it. Because in the next few minutes, you will see why the man who does not need marriage does not just scare people. He threatens everything they were taught to believe. From the moment you could understand language, a script was being whispered into your mind. One day, you'll find a nice girl. A real man settles down. You'll be happy when you get married. At first, it sounded innocent, like guidance. But underneath, it wasn't love they were teaching you. It was obedience. You were never asked if you wanted marriage. You were taught to assume it, like gravity, like death. A man without a wife? That was failure, immaturity, a red flag. By the time you could think for yourself, the programming had already taken root. Your value wasn't in who you were, it was in who you could win. Your worth wasn't measured by your depth, your purpose, your strength, but by your ability to secure a partner, put on a suit, buy the ring, and settle down. But here's the truth. It was never about your happiness. It was about your predictability. A married man is easier to manage. He has bills, he has guilt, he has mouths to feed. He's not a threat to the system. He's part of it. And this is where Nietzsche's truth slices through the illusion. Nietzsche called it slave morality, a belief system designed not to uplift you, but to tame you. It teaches you to value approval over power, conformity over truth, obedience over freedom. Be good, be safe, be dependable. And you believed it, because everyone around you did too. Your father, your teachers, your friends, all walking the same path, all wearing the same mask. But Nietzsche warned of this. He said that most people don't live. They're lived by values they never questioned. They inherit morality like a virus. They wear it like a leash and call it virtue. So, when a man appears who refuses the leash, when he says, "I choose to stay unmarried because I choose myself," he isn't just making a personal choice. He's committing a philosophical rebellion. He becomes what Nietzsche called the overman, not a tyrant, not a destroyer, but a man who creates his own values instead of adopting society's. And that man terrifies the system, because he reminds the others that they had a choice all along. You were told that marriage is tradition, that it's sacred, that it's part of growing up. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. Marriage is an economic design, disguised as a moral duty. You think you're falling in love, but behind the scenes, the machinery is humming. Wedding industry, real estate, insurance, healthcare, banking, consumer goods. Almost every major financial system profits more when you're married, because a married man spends more, works longer, complies faster, and risks less. He buys the house, he upgrades the car, he signs the family plan. He takes the job he hates because he has to, and all of it is fueled by one thing: his need to be accepted. Neediness is monetized. Dependence becomes revenue. Insecurity becomes market strategy. A man who doesn't feel complete is easy to guide, easy to guilt, easy to sell to, easy to scare. But a man who needs no one, that man breaks the cycle. He doesn't buy to impress. He doesn't upgrade to attract. He doesn't perform for validation. He chooses based on desire, not deficiency. And that makes him incredibly dangerous, not to society itself, but to the engine that keeps society running. Nietzsche warned us about this. He who cannot obey himself will be commanded. The man who doesn't govern his own desires will be governed by someone else's. So, when a man comes along who doesn't crave approval, who doesn't follow the script, who doesn't panic at the thought of solitude, he breaks the algorithm, he short-circuits the loop, he becomes unprofitable. And the system needs you to be profitable. So, it teaches you, you're only valuable when someone else wants you. You're only complete when someone chooses you. You're only a man when you're married. But that's not truth, that's marketing. Because the man who doesn't need to be chosen is finally free to choose everything. There's a different energy in a man who doesn't chase. He's not angry, he's not jaded, he's not trying to prove anything. He just isn't looking. Not for validation, not for someone to complete him, not for approval from people who gave up on themselves long ago. He walks alone, not because he has no one, but because he doesn't need anyone to define his path. And in that silence is power. Because most men are terrified of being alone, not because they hate solitude, but because solitude exposes truth. Without distraction, they face the parts of themselves they've been trained to avoid. The fears, the desires, the selfishness, the rage, the need to be worshipped, all of it. But the man who walks alone, he doesn't run from it. He turns inward. He descends into his own unconscious. He meets the figure Jung called the shadow, the dark, rejected side of the self. Most men project that darkness onto others. The complete man integrates it. He admits, yes, I have rage. Yes, I want to be free. Yes, I resist being owned. And in doing so, he becomes immune to the weapons society uses to tame him. Guilt, shame, loneliness, social pressure. Because you can't guilt a man who has faced his darkness and still stands in the light. You can't manipulate a man who has learned to sit beside his hunger without feeding it. That's what Jung called individuation, becoming psychologically whole, not good, not bad, whole. And here's the metaphor that explains it all. Most men are like tame dogs, well-fed, groomed, predictable. They bark when commanded. They sit when praised. They trade freedom for comfort. But the man who walks alone, he is the wild wolf, scarred, silent, free. He doesn't beg. He doesn't bite without cause. He roams where he chooses, not where he's leashed. And here's what scares society. You can't domesticate a wild wolf, and you can't control a man who knows how to walk alone. This man is not a rebel. He's not picketing in the streets. He's not yelling online. He's not trying to change the world. And that's what makes him more dangerous than any protest ever could. He simply stops playing. He doesn't buy what he doesn't need. He doesn't chase what doesn't serve him. He doesn't perform for love, praise, or permission. And when enough men do that, the machine begins to shake. The economy thrives on one thing: emotional insecurity. It tells men, upgrade your car, you'll be more attractive. Buy the house, it proves you're a provider. Get married, yes, it's what real men do. But when a man says no, when he says, I am already complete, he becomes unpredictable. He becomes unprofitable. He becomes a threat. Because if men no longer need external validation to feel like men, who buys the diamond ring? Who takes out the 30-year mortgage? Who signs up for the family plan? The man who doesn't need marriage isn't just single, he's unplugged. He's the glitch in a system designed to convert insecurity into cash. He's the broken cog in a machine that requires conformity to run. He's the ghost in the algorithm, untraceable, uninterested, unstoppable. And here's what the system fears most: other men seeing him. Because when one man thrives without the old rules, the illusion begins to crack. The myth breaks, the cycle stalls, and the system, starved of obedience, begins to collapse. He is the walking question no one wants to face. What if everything they taught me about manhood was never mine to begin with? There's a reason most men stay trapped. They only ever become half of who they are. From a young age, they're taught what to be: polite, strong, controlled, self-sacrificing. They're handed a script, a smile, and a suit, and they never question where the rest of them went. But Carl Jung did. He mapped it, and what he found was terrifying and liberating. He called it the path of individuation, the journey of becoming a whole human being. This path isn't about perfection, it's about integration. Most men operate with only fragments of their psyche. They live in the persona, the mask they wear in public, the image of the good man, the husband, the provider, the reliable son. But behind that mask lies everything they were told to suppress: their anger, their chaos, their selfishness, their longing to escape, their hunger for silence, space, solitude. This is the shadow, the dark side of the self. Most men spend their lives avoiding it, denying it, projecting it onto others. But the man who doesn't need marriage, he's done something rare. He turned inward. He faced the parts of himself society told him to hate. He stopped asking if they were good or bad, and asked if they were true. And then he went deeper, into what Jung called the anima, the inner feminine. Not softness, not weakness, but the source of emotional depth, intuition, and inner balance. The anima is what most men try to find in women, thinking, she completes me. But this man completes himself. He doesn't outsource wholeness, he builds it. And as he integrates all of it, persona, shadow, anima, he stops performing goodness and starts living in truth. He's not nice, he's not mean, he's real. He doesn't marry because he's supposed to. He marries, or doesn't, because he's whole either way. He doesn't seek completion through connection. He seeks connection from completeness. And that shift from performing to being makes him immune to shame, pressure, and manipulation. He is no longer a man trying to be good. He is a man who has become whole. You've been told that marriage is sacred, that it's the backbone of family, that it's rooted in love, morality, and tradition. But what if that's not the truth? What if that's just branding? Because when you trace the history of marriage, what you find isn't love, it's ownership, economics, predictability. Marriage wasn't born out of romance. It was forged as a tool to manage inheritance, lock in land deals, secure bloodlines, and control women's sexuality. It wasn't about connection. It was about containment. Later, religion stepped in, blessing the transaction, moralizing the union, and threatening damnation to those who questioned it. Then came the state, tax benefits, legal privileges, insurance incentives, tying your personal choices to political compliance. And finally, the markets. Corporations realized something. Married men are dependable men. They spend more, risk less, work longer. They become emotionally obedient, financially invested, and easier to track. The myth of marriage as a moral obligation, that's just how they got you to sign the contract. And here's the real betrayal. They made you believe it was your idea all along. They told you it was about love, but it was about leverage. They told you it was destiny, but it was design. So when a man rejects this narrative, when he says, I choose myself before tradition, he's not being immature. He's not lost. He's waking up. He's realizing that the path laid before him was never his path. It was a leash dressed up as legacy. And here's your permission. You're allowed to question it. You're allowed to want something different. You're allowed to not need what they needed, because the man who questions the myth of marriage isn't rejecting connection. He's rejecting programmed dependence. Nietzsche didn't just say, God is dead. He warned what would come after. When belief systems collapse, he said, so do the structures they upheld: morality, meaning, identity, and yes, marriage. For centuries, marriage wasn't just a social expectation. It was a moral requirement. It was sanctified, blessed. You got married because it was right. To defy that was to flirt with sin, shame, or failure. But now, the foundations are crumbling. The church no longer defines truth. The state no longer defines identity. And the market no longer hides its manipulation. The result? For the first time in history, marriage is optional, and that terrifies people. Because when marriage becomes a choice, it reveals who is truly complete and who is clinging to it out of fear. The man who doesn't need marriage isn't immoral, he's evolved. He doesn't reject love, he redefines it. He doesn't reject commitment, he reclaims it. He knows that morality must come from within, that purpose must be created, not inherited, that wholeness must be built, not borrowed. This is the post-death of God world Nietzsche spoke of, a place where meaning is no longer handed down. It must be forged, and in this world, marriage is no longer a destiny. It's a test of alignment, of truth, of sovereignty, and only a complete man can pass it. Because he doesn't marry to be saved, he marries because he's already free. There are two kinds of men walking this earth. One is praised, the other is feared. One is groomed, the other is watched. One is loved for being dependable, the other is hated for being free. Carl Jung called them two archetypal forces in every psyche, Apollonian and Dionysian. Let's start with the Apollonian man, the golden boy of society. He's structured, rational, predictable. He wears the suit, buys the house, picks the school district. He follows the rules, not out of weakness, but because it works. He provides, sacrifices, performs. He marries early, builds the family, saves for retirement. He represents order, logic, and responsibility. Society loves this man because it understands him. He fits the mold. He plays the role. He's easy to tax, track, and tame. But there's another man, the Dionysian man. He doesn't live by schedules. He lives by storms. He creates. He destroys. He wanders. He roars. He values freedom more than security, intensity more than comfort, truth more than approval. He might never marry, or he might, on his terms, he might build an empire, then burn it down and start again. He might disappear into the woods for 6 months, then re-emerge with a book, a business, or a scar. This man is chaos, but it's sacred chaos, untamed, uncontrolled, undeniably alive. And society? It rewards the Apollonian, but it quietly fears the Dionysian, because this man doesn't need permission. He doesn't wait to be chosen. He doesn't beg for belonging. He doesn't explain why he left, or why he won't come back. He is what marriage was designed to neutralize. Because marriage, at least in its traditional form, isn't about love. It's about converting the wild man into a provider, about transforming unpredictability into reliability. But the man who rejects that path, the man who preserves his chaos, he doesn't become reckless. He becomes rare. He's not allergic to commitment. He's allergic to containment. He is the man who kept his edge, and that makes him dangerous, not because he's violent, but because he's unpredictable, and the world doesn't know what to do with a man who obeys no leash, follows no script, and answers only to the fire within. Most men don't become men. They become actors. They learn to perform, not from truth, but from expectation. Smile at the in-laws, work the extra shift, swallow the emotion, be the good guy, the strong one, the safe choice. And one day, they wake up wondering, whose life am I even living? Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the false self crafted to please the crowd. It's not evil, it's necessary in small doses. But when it becomes your identity, you lose the ability to know what's real and what's just applause. Many men get married because it's the next logical scene in the script, not because they've met someone aligned with their soul, but because they're afraid of what it would mean not to, afraid of the questions, afraid of the loneliness, afraid of the silence. But the individuated man, he stops performing. He lets the mask fall, and in that rawness, he discovers something shocking. Real power doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from having the strength to choose. He doesn't chase relationships to feel complete. He builds himself until he is. Then, and only then, he chooses connection from abundance, not emptiness. This man doesn't marry for approval. He doesn't commit from fear. He loves, partners, or walks alone, all from a place of self-command. Because power isn't loud. It isn't prideful. It's not about dominance or rebellion. Power is knowing who you are when no one's watching, and still choosing truth, even when it costs you everything. That is the man society cannot own. That is the man who no longer needs to be seen, because he finally sees himself. Most people misunderstand Nietzsche's most famous idea. They think will to power means domination, control, status, ruthlessness. But that's not it. The true will to power is not about conquering others. It's about becoming yourself. It's the drive to create values where none exist, to sculpt meaning in a world that offers none, to reject inherited roles, and carve your own identity from stone. And that's what the man who doesn't need marriage has done. He's not avoiding connection. He's not afraid of love. He's not cold, damaged, or unreachable. He's just no longer building his life around someone else. He's building it from within. He's chosen to create himself, fully, brutally, truthfully. And from that ground, everything he invites into his life becomes a choice, not a compromise. This man doesn't seek power over women. He doesn't seek power over society. He seeks power over the only thing that truly matters, himself, his fears, his impulses, his need for approval, his inherited programming. He doesn't reject marriage because he's against union. He rejects the version of marriage that asks him to betray his evolution. He doesn't need to rebel to be powerful. He just needs to create. And when he does, he becomes a value generator in a world full of copy-paste lives, a lighthouse in a sea of confusion, a creator in a culture of consumers. And that's the reimagined will to power, not to rule others, but to become so complete that you inspire others to rise, simply by existing. Let's forget everything they taught you for a moment. Forget what men are supposed to do. Forget what love is meant to look like. Forget the praise you were trained to chase. Strip it all away. And just ask yourself this. Whose story are you living? Is it yours? Or is it a script you inherited, without consent? Most men don't choose their life. They drift into it. They perform. They adapt. And they call it purpose. They call it maturity. They call it love. But deep down, something always feels off. Because when your choices are rooted in fear, fear of being alone, fear of being judged, fear of being different, you're not building a life. You're building a cage, one you might not even see. And that's the truth most men never confront. They didn't marry from wholeness. They married from need. They didn't choose. They obeyed. But the man who doesn't need marriage, he forces a reckoning. He is the mirror no one wants to look into, because his very existence asks the most terrifying question. What if I built my entire life on someone else's idea of what makes a man? He shows you it's possible to be whole before the vow, to be free before the family, to be powerful without performance. And that power, it doesn't destroy relationships, it transforms them. It builds partnerships based on authenticity, not obligation, connection, not compliance, mutual growth, not mutual dependency. And this is what Nietzsche meant when he said, become who you are, not who your parents hoped for, not who society designed, not who your insecurities pretend to be, but the man underneath the performance, the one who can love without needing, the one who can commit without collapsing, the one who can walk away, not out of fear, but out of truth. So now the question isn't, should you get married or not? The real question is, are you choosing from fear or from strength? From programming or from soul? Because the man who doesn't need marriage, he's already made his choice. What's yours?